The following video may contain mature language and or subject matter which make it inappropriate for young audiences. Fuck me. The 2013 Disney film Frozen is pretty good. I remember seeing all the marketing back when it was about to be released and expecting to hate it.
My lady.
Whoa, whoa. This is awkward.
But I ended up enjoying it quite a lot. It's a well-made, entertaining film that accomplished what I thought at the time to be impossible, largely recapturing the same kind of energy with the public as many of the Disney Renaissance films from the 90s. The first, and in my opinion, biggest mark in Frozen's favor is its soundtrack. The movie has my favorite soundtrack from a Disney animated film since Mulan back in 1998. Most of the songs are incorporated well into the film and are very catchy, but not in an annoying sort of way, unless of course you've heard them 50 quadrillion times, at which point, yes, they do start to get pretty annoying. Nonetheless, the music is all pretty good, and Idina Menzel in particular is spectacular.
The wickedly talented, one and only Adele Dazeem.
Both Menzel and Kristen are great as the two lead characters, Elsa and Anna, respectively. While it may be easy to write off the decision to have two Disney princesses in this movie as a naked cash grab, and to a large extent it probably is, I do still appreciate the fact that this creative decision is in service of the story being told. In fact, you wouldn't be able to tell this story at all without it. Frozen's emotional core stems directly from the relationship between these two sisters. They're both well-written characters, and despite being more or less at odds with one another for the majority of the film, you can always understand and sympathize with both of their perspectives simultaneously. The two have a very authentic sibling dynamic. I wouldn't be at all surprised to learn that one or more of this film's writers also had siblings who they frequently butted heads with growing up. I also really like the story and how it incorporates its themes of self-acceptance while playing around with and subverting many well-worn tropes to be found in classic Disney movies. I do wish it were a little less on the nose in that regard.
You can't marry a man you just met.
You got engaged to someone you just met that day?
Yeah, anyway.
Hang on. You mean to tell me you got engaged to someone you just met that day?
Yes, pay attention.
But once again, at least the movie is doing this for a specific purpose within the story, rather than as a half-baked attempt to surprise the audience. As for the rest of the cast, Anna's love interest, Kristoff, may not be particularly interesting, but he's entertaining enough. I like the running gag where he provides both sides of the conversation with his reindeer Sven.
This whole thing has ruined me for helping anyone ever again. She'll die on her own. I can live with that. But you won't get your new sled if she's dead.
I went into this film assuming that I was going to really, passionately hate Olaf, but nah, he's mostly harmless. Even gets a few chuckles out of me at certain points.
Oh, look at that. I've been impaled.
The villain, Hans, is, of course, mostly a red herring. You're supposed to think that he's your typical Prince Charming character for the majority of the film until it turns out that he's actually the mustache-twirling villain. It would have been nice if they could have fleshed him out a little bit more, but he also works well enough for what he is that it didn't bother me. The only characters I really can't stand are the trolls. They're annoying, they're clumsily incorporated into the story, I don't like their design, and their song is my least favorite in the movie, dragging the plot to a screeching halt. And this brings me to the negatives, because while I did like this film overall, there are still a bunch of parts in Frozen that I think could have been ironed out a lot with another script rewrite. Like I said, everything about the trolls just feels clumsy. They can answer questions or solve problems as the plot demands, yet they also have these arbitrary limitations whenever we need the movie to be more dramatic. And apart from exposition, they don't really serve any other functional purpose within the story, which is always a big no-no. I really wish that these guys could have just been cut. But they're only in, 2 scenes, so it's not a big deal. There's a few other things about the plot that annoy me, like why doesn't anybody stop Anna, the only remaining member of the royal family, from chasing down Elsa through the wilderness or even attempt to send an escort along with her? Likewise, why does nobody seemingly question her decision to leave Prince Hans, a foreigner, in charge of the kingdom in her absence?
I leave Prince Hans in charge.
These problems are kind of nitpicky, and I think they only bother me because, again, I think a quick rewrite could have just fixed a lot of it. One other small complaint I have with this film is its animation and character designs. Now, let me stop you right there, because no, I'm not saying that this animation is bad. Far from it. It's actually quite good overall, and even breathtaking at times. The particle effect being used to create the snow looks especially fantastic. No, my problem here is that with the older hand-drawn Disney movies, every film had a slightly different art style depending on who the animators were or what kind of tone or themes the movie was going for. Even just at a glance, you would never mistake Sleeping Beauty for The Little Mermaid, for Pocahontas, for Mulan, Mulan, for Hercules, etc. Tangled, Frozen, and Moana, on the other hand, all just kind of look like they're done in this generic Disney style. It's the same reason I hated seeing all of the Disney princesses in one place with their styles homogenized and rendered into 3D for Wreck-It Ralph 2. There's just something a little bit too assembly line about these films' animation, impressive as it may be most of the time. Because this is all digital, most of the assets have either been reused or built upon what we've already seen in Tangled. My single biggest problem with Frozen, however, the one thing about it that just absolutely drives me up the wall every single time I think about it, and this gripe also applies to Tangled too, which I think is a much better film. It's the title. Like, Frozen? Really? Come on, that's so generic and lame sounding. You could call any of these other films here Frozen, and the name would be just as applicable as it is to this movie. What would have been wrong with calling this movie The Snow Queen, the title of the story that this movie is loosely based on? I get that Frozen is maybe a bit catchier, but do we really need to sacrifice the integrity of the film for an ever so slight boost in marketability? Like, imagine if you took fellow Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale story, The Little Mermaid, and renamed it to something similarly asinine. You'd wind up with the movie being called something like, I don't know, Splash. Wait a sec. Of course, upon release, Frozen became an overnight smash hit and international phenomenon. For a while there, it was impossible to go anywhere without hearing "Let it go" or seeing a ton of Frozen merchandise everywhere.
Merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made. The doll, the t-shirt, the coloring book, the lunchbox, the breakfast cereal, the flamethrower! The kids love this one.
I don't know if the movie was as great as all that. The massive amount of public discourse surrounding Frozen, both good and bad, has worn significantly on my nerves, but none of that is the movie's fault. Like I said, for what it is, I think Frozen is a perfectly fine, entertaining film that did not need a sequel! But it seems in Disney's never-ending quest for more money, it's getting one anyway. Come on back this Friday to see what I thought about Frozen 2. And if you like this video that is not made for children, you'd be doing me a huge favor if you could hit that like button, subscribe for more like it in the future, and ring the bell to stay updated on all of my future videos. Leave a comment down below with any of your thoughts on Frozen. Check out some of the other great stuff I've got up here on my channel, and as always, thanks so much to all of you guys for watching, and take care.